What you see on your screen is one of the most popular welcome parties that female inmates get on the first day of prison. But it's not as horrible as what this warden is about to do to this woman. Let's look at all the times new female inmates almost lost it on their first day in prison. Arrest and bus travel. For many women entering prison, the trauma begins long before they reach the prison gates. The moments following an arrest are filled with uncertainty, fear, and in many cases, abuse. The trip to prison, often an overlooked part of incarceration, is where many women first experience non-conventional abuses, shaping their mental state long before they set foot inside a prison cell. With law enforcement officers in complete control, women are often powerless to resist the misconduct and abuse they face. The isolation of a prison transport van, the darkness of the road, and the absence of oversight create a breeding ground for abuse that goes largely unpunished. This environment has led to numerous cases of misconduct, physical assault, and psychological torment, forever scarring the women who experience it. One of the most horrific examples of such abuse occurred on May 30th at 1:09 a.m. when Nicholas Aitchison, a former Daytona Beach police officer, took advantage of his position of power while transporting a recently arrested woman to jail. Aitchison deviated from his route, stopping his transport van behind the Volusia United Educators Building, an isolated location nearly 2 miles from the jail. The woman, already handcuffed and vulnerable, was ordered to exit the vehicle. Confused and terrified, she obeyed. It was then that Aitchison made his first demand: oral sex. The woman refused, but Aitchison persisted, now ordering her to expose her breasts. Again, she declined. Growing frustrated, Aitchison escalated his assault, taking her hand and forcibly placing it on his exposed genitals, repeating his request for sexual favors. After her continued refusal, he eventually drove her to jail as if nothing had happened. What makes this case particularly disturbing is the ease with which Aitchison was able to exploit his authority. It was only after his arrest that the full extent of his predatory behavior came to light. In a plea deal, Aitchison received a mere 30-day jail sentence and probation, an insultingly lenient punishment considering the trauma he inflicted. However, the horrors of prisoner transport extend beyond law enforcement officers to private extradition companies, which operate under even less oversight. These for-profit companies, tasked with moving prisoners across state lines, have repeatedly been exposed for their abusive and inhumane treatment of inmates. One of the most chilling cases is that of Robin Derbyshire, a 41-year-old woman who endured a 4-day nightmare while being transported from Carson City, Nevada, to Colorado in May 2001. Derbyshire was placed in a van operated by Extraditions International, a private company with a history of prisoner mistreatment. She was one of only 2 women among a group of male prisoners with 2 male officers in charge. From the very beginning, the power imbalance was clear. One of the officers, Richard Almendarez, was particularly cruel. He subjected Derbyshire to relentless mistreatment, referring to her as a and asking her, "You like big, don't you?" He forced her and the other female prisoner to sit on his lap, demanding that they tell him X-rated bedtime stories. As the van neared the Mexican border, Almendarez went so far as to suggest that he should take them to a hotel and then shoot them. The abuse escalated when the van made a rare restroom stop. Almendarez took Derbyshire into a bathroom, armed and threatening, and ordered her to lie down on the floor. He then exposed himself, forced her to lift her skirt, and masturbated above her, ejaculating onto her breasts. Terrified and powerless, Derbyshire had no choice but to comply. When she expressed her horror, Almendarez told her that if she screamed, he would shoot her and claim that she had tried to escape. Despite the egregiousness of the attack, the private company continued to allow Almendarez to operate. Even when Derbyshire reported the abuse at a stop in Colorado, she was simply placed back in the same van with him. The final 2 hours of the trip were especially terrifying, as Derbyshire overheard Almendarez muttering that he should have because she refused to. Her suffering only ended when the transport van broke down, forcing her to be transferred to another vehicle with different drivers. But the damage was done. Derbyshire would go on to suffer from severe PTSD, nightmares, and lasting emotional distress, a tragic testament to the unchecked power of those entrusted with the transport of inmates. Across the United States, women prisoners are frequently subjected to misconduct, verbal harassment, and psychological abuse during transport. The ordeal doesn't end once female inmates arrive at their destination. After enduring the trauma of transport, they are immediately subjected to another humiliating experience: the strip search. This is one of the most degrading experiences a female inmate endures upon arrival. From the moment they step into the facility, they are stripped of not only their clothing, but also their dignity. Women are forced to undress completely, standing exposed under the cold, watchful eyes of officers. Every inch of their body is scrutinized as they follow dehumanizing commands. They must open their mouths and wag their tongues, shake out their hair, and raise their breasts for inspection. But the most humiliating part comes when they are ordered to turn around, squat, spread their cheeks, squeaks and cough again and again until their throat aches. This is done under the pretense of security, but for many women it is nothing short of psychological and physical torment. Some officers take advantage of this power dynamic, turning what is supposed to be a routine check into an act of abuse. For years, correctional facilities have operated in a way that strips inmates of their basic humanity, but some cases have been so egregious that they've led to legal action. One of the most infamous examples is the $60 million lawsuit against Cook County Jail in Illinois, where nearly 400,000 former detainees came forward to describe the horror they endured during intake procedures. Between 2004 and 2009, women, many of whom were charged with minor offenses, were subjected to strip searches in large groups. They were mocked, humiliated, and degraded while standing completely naked. Guards would make crude comments, laughing as women were forced to expose every inch of their bodies. One victim recalled how she was ordered to squat and cough multiple times while officers stood inches away staring at her body. Another described how she was menstruating at the time of her search, yet she was forced to remove her tampon in front of male and female officers. The lawsuit not only exposed the cruelty of the system, but also highlighted how these searches were done without any reasonable suspicion that detainees were concealing contraband. Many of the women involved in the case were never convicted of a crime. They were simply awaiting trial, yet they were subjected to this level of inhumane treatment. Eventually, Cook County agreed to pay $60 million in settlements, but money can't erase the trauma these women endured. And yet, despite this case making headlines and bringing national attention to the issue, abuses inside correctional facilities continue. Even today, women are still coming forward with horrifying experiences of mistreatment, assault, and abuse by the very people meant to maintain order. And it's not just inmates who suffer. Sometimes even those who visit prisons are subjected to the same treatment. 3 New York City women have filed notices of claim against the Department of Correction, detailing how they were mistreated by correction officers during visits to see inmates. They detailed how they were subjected to invasive and humiliating strip searches by correctional officers, describing the process as degrading and abusive.
I had to basically take off my bra, and my pants were open. When I walked out, I cried, I just felt disgusting.
And she spreaded my front, and then she told me to cough twice.
So she went inside, she moved around, touched my private area.
Even the rich and famous aren't safe from the horrors of the prison system. Take Paris Hilton, for example. Back in 2007, the reality TV star and heiress was sentenced to 23 days in jail for violating probation in a reckless driving case. But what stood out about her experience wasn't just the fact that a wealthy celebrity had to serve time. It was how she was treated from the moment she stepped inside the facility. Hilton later revealed that during intake, she was forced to strip naked and undergo the same invasive search as any other female inmate.
I was force-fed medications and sexually abused by the staff. I was violently restrained and dragged down hallways, stripped naked, and thrown into solitary confinement.
She described the process as one of the most humiliating and terrifying moments of her life. She was made to stand completely exposed as officers inspected her body, reducing her to nothing more than an object under their control.
What I experienced in these places was inhumane, and it's something that will affect me for the rest of my life.
Her story made headlines because of her fame, but thousands of other women go through this every single day, with no media coverage, no public outrage, and no way to fight back. While these procedures are often justified as necessary security measures, the reality is that they are widely abused and used as tools of control rather than protection. They expose women to unnecessary humiliation, emotional trauma, and in some cases, outright sexual violence. But the horrors inside these facilities don't stop at the hands of correctional officers. Even after enduring dehumanizing searches and mistreatment, many women face another nightmare: being placed in the wrong housing units. Classification. For many women entering prison for the first time, the fear of the unknown is overwhelming. The cold steel doors, the echoing halls, the stripped-down cells, it all feels surreal, like stepping into a world where every comfort and security they once knew is gone. But what makes the experience even more terrifying is not just the prison itself, but the people they're forced to live with. Misclassification happens far too often, placing vulnerable inmates in cells with some of the most violent, dangerous, and unstable individuals. First-time offenders, many of whom are locked up for non-violent crimes, find themselves housed with career criminals, hardened predators, rapists, and mentally unstable individuals who see them as nothing more than easy targets. After enduring the degrading strip search, they hope the worst is behind them, but it isn't. In some some cases, they lose something even more precious: their safety, their dignity, and their sanity. Many women are forced to share cells with aggressive offenders, enduring constant threats, coercion, and physical misconduct. They report feeling like prey, trapped in a cage with no escape. Some are extorted for commissary items. Others are blackmailed, forced into unwanted relationships, or brutally assaulted. The correctional officers who are supposed to protect them often ignore their pleas for help, leaving them to fend for themselves in an environment where the strong prey on the weak. This nightmare became a horrifying reality for one woman at the Women's Correctional Center in Washington. In 2021, Christopher Williams, a transgender inmate with a history of violent offenses and sexual misconduct, was transferred from a men's prison to the Women's Correctional Center. The move, like many misclassifications before it, would prove to be catastrophic for at least one female inmate. According to journalist Anna Slatz, the woman's identity was protected for privacy reasons, and she was referred to as Mary in her report. Mary was serving time for a non-violent offense, doing her best to navigate the harsh realities of prison life when Williams approached her. He claimed his cellmate was bullying him and asked if he could move in with her. At the time, she had no reason to suspect anything sinister. She wasn't uncomfortable with him being transgender, and she agreed. But soon after, she began to notice red flags. Williams would make bizarre, sexually charged comments. He wanted her to know when he was having an erection, dropping disturbing remarks, like, "It hurts when it fills up with blood." Mary did her best to ignore him, but his behavior only escalated. When she continued rejecting his advances, his frustration turned to something much darker. He began issuing threats, making it clear that her refusal wasn't an option. "I don't know why you don't want my dick. Everyone else does," he told her. Then the stalking began. He followed her into the bathroom. He watched her constantly. The worst part was the chilling promise he made: "Just so you know, I can get you wherever I want." Mary knew she was in danger. She went to the correctional staff and begged for help. But like so many other women who report abuse behind bars, she was ignored. Things only got worse when she was prescribed sleeping medication to help with her restlessness. The pills made her drowsy, making it harder for her to stay fully aware of her surroundings at night. But whenever she did wake up, she started noticing something unsettling. Williams sitting on her bed, watching her. He never used to do this before, and the sight of him silently staring as she drifted in and out of consciousness sent a shiver down her spine. One night, after taking her pill and falling into a deep sleep, Mary woke up to the sound of an officer pounding on her cell door, yelling at Williams. The officer had likely caught him in the act, and Mary didn't know how many times he had touched her while she was sedated. She was confused and struggling to catch up with the situation. The officer eventually left, and the cell fell silent again. After the officer was gone, Williams became more aggressive. He pulled out 2 strap-on dildos he had smuggled in and demanded that she use them on him. He then started to mistreat her, but the officer wasn't there this time. The horror of the moment was paralyzing. The man who had been stalking her, threatening her, and violating her boundaries had finally done what he had been planning all along. She immediately reported the assault to correctional staff again, but this time they believed her, although it was too late. A search of their cell was conducted and the sex toys were found. She filed a Prison Rape Elimination Act (PREA) report, and for once the authorities had no choice but to act. The report was determined to be substantiated. Williams was taken to segregation and later moved to another unit. Mary's story is just one of many. Across the country, women are forced to share cells with predators, violent offenders, and mentally unstable individuals. For a first-time inmate, being misclassified can be the difference between surviving prison and being completely broken by it. Many women enter prison for nonviolent crimes, petty theft, drug possession, or fraud, only to find themselves housed with rapists and murderers. They are thrown into an environment where their safety is left to chance, where the wrong cellmate can turn their sentence into a waking nightmare. But wait, strip searches and terrifying cellmates are just the appetizer on your first day in prison as a woman. Food and prison gangs. Even something as routine as eating can turn into a dangerous game, where the food itself is often a punishment, and the rules of mealtime are written in blood. It's not just about the rotten meals that barely pass as food, though that alone can make life miserable, but about the power struggles, the silent threats, and the unspoken laws that turn the cafeteria into a battlefield. Sit in the wrong place, take too much, or refuse an offer, and you might not make it to dessert. Prison food is infamous for being terrible, but that doesn't quite capture just how bad it is. The meals are often unrecognizable. Processed meat soaked in thick, tasteless gravy, stale bread that crumbles in your hands, and vegetables so overcooked they practically dissolve before you chew them. It's barely enough to keep someone alive, let alone healthy. Inmates complain of constant hunger, feeling their bodies weaken from lack of nutrition. The vitamins and proteins they need simply aren't there, and over time it starts to show. Sunken faces, brittle hair, and bodies that feel more exhausted with each passing day. But worse than the taste or the lack of nutrients is the fact that eating can actually put your life at risk. On March 29, 2024, at Lewis Prison in East Sussex, the daily struggle for food took a terrifying turn when several prisoners and staff felt sick after a meal. It started with dizziness, confusion, and slurred speech. Then came the vomiting. At first, prison officials feared the worst: fentanyl, synthetic opioids, some kind of deliberate poisoning. A chemical and biological response team was called in, and the kitchen was locked down as emergency services rushed in. When the panic settled, authorities determined it was likely a case of food poisoning, though no one could say for sure whether it was accidental or intentional. But the dangers of mealtime don't stop at the food itself. Sitting down to eat isn't as simple as grabbing a tray and picking a spot. The prison cafeteria has its own unspoken rules, and breaking them can have consequences that last long after the meal is over. Every table has an owner, and those invisible lines of control are drawn by race, gang affiliation, and power. A new inmate, unaware of the rules, might unknowingly sit at the wrong table and find herself facing a brutal reality check. A look, a warning, and if she doesn't move fast enough, a beating. The same goes for food portions. If someone takes too much, or worse, takes something that belongs to someone else, it's not seen as a mistake. It's seen as a challenge. And challenges don't end with words. Prison gangs control more than just the cells in the yard. They rule the cafeteria too. Mealtime isn't just about eating, it's about control. Certain gangs claim ownership over specific parts of the dining hall, and if you're not part of their group, you better stay away. Some of them even dictate who gets how much food, taking extra portions for themselves and leaving others with scraps. It's not just about power, it's about survival. And for those who don't fall in line, there's a price to pay. New inmates, especially those without protection, quickly learn that keeping their tray full isn't as easy as it sounds. Some are forced to give up parts of their meals to gang members as a sign of respect, or rather submission. Others find themselves extorted for what little food they have, knowing that refusing could mean getting jumped in the yard later. Gangs often use mealtime as a way to recruit. A woman sitting alone might find herself approached by someone offering extra food, a friendly gesture in a place where kindness is rare. At first it seems harmless, just a piece of cornbread, an extra slice of cheese, but nothing in prison is free. Accepting food from the wrong person can mean unknowingly stepping into a debt, one that will need to be repaid in ways far worse than giving up a meal. The next time they come around, they're not offering, they're demanding, and the price is never small. Surviving prison is about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. In the cafeteria, it's about knowing where to sit, what to eat, and who to avoid. It's about understanding that something as simple as a meal isn't just about hunger, it's about hierarchy, control, and power. And in a place where even food can turn against you, mealtime isn't just a break in the day, it's a test, one that some people fail in ways they never see coming. And there comes the last battle, a psychological war that begins the moment the cell door slams shut. The first night. This is more than just a few hours of confinement. It's a psychological nightmare. By the time an inmate is locked behind those metal doors, they've already endured a series of humiliating and traumatic events. The strip search, the overwhelming noise, the aggressive or unwelcoming cellmates, the horrifying meal in a dining hall where they feel like prey, all of it leaves them shaken. Fear settles deep and the mind begins to unravel. Some inmates pace their cells, unable to sit still. Others curl up in their bunks, too afraid to move. Sleep is a distant thought, replaced by paranoia, anxiety, and the overwhelming realization that this is now their reality. Every little sound feels like a threat. The distant screams, the occasional thud of violence, the muffled sobs from another cell. Each noise chips away at the last bit of composure they had left. This is when unhealthy decisions begin. Some inmates, overwhelmed by fear, lash out, screaming, kicking at their doors, begging to be let out. Others shut down completely, sinking into a mental void where nothing feels real. For many, self-harm becomes an escape, whether it's through desperation-fueled attempts at suicide or finding ways to hurt themselves just to feel something other than terror. The first night can be life-threatening in more ways than one. Christine McDonald was one of those inmates who didn't make it through. On March 1st, 2019, Christine arrived at HMP Style for a 12-week sentence. A mother of 4, she had been arrested for shoplifting, an offense driven by her struggles with opioid addiction. But her arrest had come with a devastating price. Just the day before, her daughter Christy had fallen from a third-story window during the police raid, suffering serious injuries. Christine didn't know if her daughter was dead or alive. Thrown into the first night center, Christine was visibly distraught. Other inmates recalled hearing her sobbing, desperately asking about her daughter's condition. But prison isn't a place for sympathy. Her cries were ignored. She pressed the emergency call button, requesting medical attention, but no one came. She was left alone in her cell, withdrawing from opioids, drowning in grief, and battling the terror of her first night behind bars. At 10:30 p.m., she pressed the button again. By 11 p.m., she was found hanging in her cell. Christine was rushed to the hospital, but by morning she was gone. Her death wasn't an isolated incident. Within just over a year, 3 women had died in that same first night center. Their suffering had been ignored, their mental distress dismissed. The prison later claimed to have improved suicide prevention measures, but for Christine and many others, it was too late. The first night in prison is when inmates are at their most vulnerable. It's when fear, shame, and hopelessness collide in a way that can break even the strongest. While some survive and learn to adapt, others, like Christine, never make it past those first unbearable hours. The first day of a new female inmate in prison is a harsh and terrifying experience in general. From the abuse during transport to the humiliation of strip searches, the fear of being placed with dangerous cellmates, and the overwhelming anxiety of the first night, every moment is filled with pain and fear. This day is often the hardest part of prison time, a brutal initiation that breaks many before they even have a chance to adapt. If you enjoyed the video, please click on any of the cards that appear on your screen to view many more interesting videos like this.